Alright, I fucking love Godzilla. I'm pretty ecstatic at how well Godzilla Minus One is doing, and I'm excited for the potential new fans this film could bring to the franchise. I love it when new shit brings in new fans. However, for anyone who is new to this franchise, I realize that it can seem a little overwhelming to get into. That's 33 films spanning almost 6 decades. Some of these films are great, some of these films are very much not. The great thing is, though, that most of these films stand on their own. Even the films that share continuity with each other still work just on their own and can be watched with no knowledge of the preceding films. This means that you can watch most of these movies in whatever order you like and not have to worry about the lore too much. So I'm going to make an S through F tier list to maybe help any new or young fans decide where to start. The first thing you should know as a fan of the Godzilla franchise is that the movies are divided into several groupings or eras. The original run of 15 films is called the Showa era and spans from 1954 to 1975. Then, the next era is called the Heisei era. This group contains 7 movies and spans from 1984 to 1995. Following this, we come to the Millennium era, which contains 6 films and spans from 1999 to 2004. Finally, we come to the current era of Godzilla films, which contains only 5 films, including Minus One, the latest installment. I'll be going through all of these in chronological order, ranking each one and sharing just a few thoughts on each. Trust me, this is going to be really hard for me to limit my commentary, but I don't want this thing to take 30 hours, so I'm going to have to speak briefly about each one. I will also say that the American-made films are not included on this list. The films included in this list will only be the films produced in Japan by Toho. Let's go. Okay, starting at the beginning, all the way back to 1954. This is just a few years after World War II, we get the first Godzilla by Ishiro Honda. This is the original, the classic, the birth of the greatest character ever to be in film, Godzilla. This movie goes to its rightful spot in the A class. After the smash success of Godzilla, Toho rushes to capitalize off the success. They hire director Motoyoshi Oda to shit out a shit film filled with shitty characters and really odd-looking fight scenes between Godzilla and Anguirus. This is 1955's Godzilla Raids Again. The plot of this movie is really weird. It seems like the writer was on some weird incel type of mindset, so the human scenes in this movie really make me cringe. The new kaiju, Anguirus, is introduced and quickly cements his place as a very lame and underpowered character. This movie goes in the F class. After a 6-year break, recovering from the failure of Godzilla Raids Again, Toho brings back Ishiro Honda for what is to be the event of the century, King Kong versus Godzilla. The two most popular kaiju from Japan and America finally meet to battle for supremacy. But this movie suffers from just a lot of issues, and an unusual amount of brownface. There's one kind of cool sequence where a giant octopus attacks a hut, but not really much else. This movie is in the F class. Just a couple of years later, Toho somehow gets their shit together and releases Mothra vs. Godzilla. This movie again brings together two kaijus from separate movies to face each other. Unlike its predecessor, this movie is elegant in its storytelling. The humans in the movie have an engaging plot that parallels the monsters really well. There's an interesting scene between Godzilla and the human villains that makes some fans wonder if this is the first glimpse of a moral Godzilla. The differences between Godzilla and Mothra are highlighted pretty well in this movie. The way their different powers work, the way their different personalities are, the way their different origins make them. They just have a kind of chemistry that works really well. This movie is in the A class. Somehow, that same year, Toho releases Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. This movie introduces Godzilla's first overpowered nemesis, the monster which becomes Godzilla's arch-enemy. Batman has the Joker. The Paw Paw Bears had Dark Paw. And Godzilla has King Ghidorah. This movie kicks ass, and also brings another new kaiju from his previous standalone movie, Rodan. King Ghidorah enters with a huge bang and establishes himself as an extremely powerful force of hatred and destruction. Godzilla is in full-on protector of the Earth mode here as he teams up with Rodan and Mothra to defend Earth from the beast who would easily be able to destroy Earth otherwise. It's really good and is definitely in the A class. The next year, King Ghidorah makes a comeback in Invasion of the Astro Monster. This movie, interestingly, has Nick Adams as one of the main protagonists. The story on this one is good and the action plays well. Rodan once again jumps in to help Godzilla defeat King Ghidorah along with a few assists from the human protagonists. If you watch this movie dubbed, which I don't recommend you do, but if you do watch it dubbed, this also contains many of the clips that MF Doom samples in his King Ghidorah stuff. All in all, this movie is really good. However, coming off the end of the previous King Ghidorah movie, it does feel a bit cheap, a bit like a rehash. No hate here at all, but this one goes in the B class. In 1966, we get treated to the badass film Ibira, Horror of the Deep. In America, this was released as Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, but as always, I highly recommend watching the original Japanese cut, watching the Japanese with English subtitles if you can find it. This is, to me, a required viewing for the franchise. Newcomer director Jun Fukuda brings some new stylistic elements to the fight scenes, and they work incredibly well. This was the first Godzilla movie I owned on VHS as a kid, and it's just cemented in my brain. This movie goes in the A bracket for sure. Next, we get another film directed by Jun Fukuda, and that his contribution is the 1967 Son of Godzilla. Yeah, this is the movie that gives us Manila, Godzilla's son. Many people in America may remember this character being named Godzuki. However, this is due to the Hanna-Barbera Godzilla cartoon, which should never be watched. Godzilla's son Manila is actually kind of cute, and the scenes of him with Godzilla are endearing. The cuteness of Manila is offset nicely by the creepy monsters in this movie, which, in addition to an army of mantis monsters, we get introduced to Komanga, a giant spider who's badass and scary. Son of Godzilla rocks and goes in the A bracket. In the next year, 1968, it's Destroy All Monsters. This movie's big premise is that it has like hella monsters in it. The cast of kaijus, in addition to Godzilla, is as follows: King Ghidorah, Rodan, Mothra, Angrius, Manila, Kumanga, and then some made-up monsters making their first appearance: Manda, Gorosaurus, Baragon, and Varan. Despite this seemingly cool premise, the movie isn't really my favorite. It feels kind of cheap and lifeless. Also, it kind of heightens this underlying trend in Godzilla to make it seem like a pro wrestling show. This movie isn't bad, it doesn't go in the F category, but it's kind of a pointless installment to the franchise. It doesn't really bring much to the table and instead goes in the C bracket. In 1969, veteran Godzilla director Ishiro Honda released the shittiest shit stain onto the whole Godzilla legacy. This movie just feels like a betrayal at every level, and watching this as a fan will make you feel like Toho just farted in your face for money. When the title says all monsters attack, what they mean is this movie is a clip show. It's literally a bunch of kaiju fights from the previous movies, just the footage from the previous movies replayed, kind of strung together through the story of this little kid who's getting bullied and has dreams of Godzilla and Manila that like inspire him to be brave. And in these dream sequences, the only things that we get to see that aren't just literal recycled footage are these dumbass fights between Manila and the fucking dumbest, ugliest, shittiest monster in the Godzilla roster, Gabara. It sucks, and thankfully Gabara is never seen again. This movie goes in the F bracket and is the worst Godzilla movie ever made. It's not even bad in a fun way, like some of the others. Don't watch it. Holy fucking shit. This shit is my fucking shit, dog. 1971's Godzilla vs. Hedorah by newcomer director Yoshimitsu Banno. This is the only Godzilla movie directed by this guy Yoshimitsu Banno, and I don't know why. This movie brings back something that's been kind of missing from the movies for a few years, and that is the real monster movie aspect. Kaijus can come in different styles. There's the more pro wrestling style of approach, or like the superhero approach, but to me, the Godzilla movies should be monster movies first. Monsters that are scary and deadly and sometimes even gross or grotesque. Hedorah is all of those things. The American release of this movie was renamed Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, but it's recut and it has a bunch of awesome footage removed. So I recommend, as always, don't watch the American recut. If you can find the Japanese version with English subtitles, it's called Godzilla vs. Hedorah. It's relatively easy to find. Anyways, this movie has like this whole psychedelic, trippy vibe that I fucking adore. The soundtrack and visuals are top-notch, and Hedorah is like a terrifying, creepy menace. Some of the death scenes in this movie are intense, and sometimes we're treated to some very disturbing visuals without warning. I absolutely love this film, and I could probably make a whole video talking about it, but I won't. I'll just put it here in the S class. This movie is incredible and should be watched by everyone. always. Next is the monster that brought gore to the game. 1972's Godzilla vs. Gigan brings back veteran Godzilla director Jun Fukuda, and we get a new kaiju named Gigan. If Godzilla characters were WWE wrestlers, then Gigan would be like Cactus Jack. During the fight scenes in this movie, Gigan is able to bloody up Anguirus and Godzilla a few times that look pretty crazy. The story follows a struggling manga artist and his struggle to come up with a new kaiju hero character. This angle gives the story kind of a meta feel to it that I think is really cool. The human cast overall is especially cool and endearing in this film. For what it is, this movie's good as can be. It is solid, but not anything really super special. We do get a nice tag team match between Gigan and King Ghidorah versus Godzilla and Anguirus. This movie gets a B. Godzilla versus Megalon. Megalon is such a cool name, which makes it all the worse that this movie sucks as much as it does. Look, I love professional wrestling. I get it. These are kaijus. They fight each other. Coming at this from a pro wrestling style angle is something natural to do, but Jesus, like, if you're gonna do this wrestling style, then you gotta do it good. If Godzilla is acting like a wrestling character, then the way he emotes should be like Kane or Vader or something. In this movie, the way he emotes and kind of pantomimes, he is more like Chris Jericho or Hulk Hogan or something. It's fucking ridiculous. It's Godzilla, and of course ridiculousness is going to come into play in any of the movies, but this one, it's just too much. The fighting is like a half-assed tag team match that would have been at the bottom of the card in an early taping of Monday Night Raw. There's one cool thing in this movie, and that's there's this car chase scene with some really insane fucking downhill driving. It's the only few shots in the movie worth a damn. It's only a few shots in the movie, but damn if the stuntmen involved weren't really fucking skilled drivers. This comprises about 7 total seconds of the screen time, and of course isn't at all enough to save this movie from an F rating. Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. Fuck. I fucking love Showa-era Mechagodzilla. This movie starts right out with a bang, with the soundtrack. The score of this film is almost as good as Hedorah. Mechagodzilla has this like big band swing music vibe to his theme music, and it's fucking awesome. There's also a cool 70s spy sound to some of the music in it, and it's just great. Mechagodzilla definitely continues the trend of kind of a pro wrestling setup to the monsters' interactions with each other, but this time they just do it better. A chunk of Godzilla got scraped off and there's metal underneath? Oh my god, it's an imposter! The monster drama is just dope. The human subplot in this movie is one of the best in the whole franchise. Just something about the chemistry of this team is really charming. This movie is S-class. And here we are. It's 1975. A new Godzilla movie is coming out, and it's Ishiro Honda's return to directing. The man that brought us the first iteration of Godzilla way back in 1954. Ishiro Honda hasn't gotten to direct a Godzilla movie since he shut out the shit that was All Monsters Attack back in 1969. Now he's back. Will he pull off one of his great classics, or will he blow it? Well, friends, he does in fact pull it off and gives us a classic. The 15th Godzilla movie and final film in the Showa era is in fact great. The story is awesome, the monsters are top quality. In addition to Mechagodzilla being rebuilt by a mad scientist with a creepy robot daughter, we get a new kaiju called Titanosaurus. He looks great and has an evil cackling face, and some of the scenes of him just look really scary for some reason to me. The human storyline with the creepy robot daughter that falls in love with the hero is solid. The movie is solid. More than solid, really. The movie feels like it has a lot of heart and really takes itself seriously as a goodbye to Godzilla for a while. This movie goes in the A class, and after 1975, we won't see Godzilla again for 9 years.
It's 1984, the year I was born, and the beginning of the second wave or era of Godzilla movies, the Heisei era. 9 years after the conclusion of the Showa era, we get treated to the return of Godzilla. This movie is absolutely fucking gorgeous, incredible, terrifying, captivating, intense, and even a little subversive. It's so good, and I cannot say enough about it. The problem is, this is one of the hardest Godzilla movies to find. It's not streaming anywhere. On YouTube, you can only find the American recut called Godzilla 1985. And this is one of the worst recuts of a Godzilla film, as they change the tone entirely. The original film is very dark and mood-driven, and the American recut really tries to put a more lighthearted and almost comedic spin on everything. The only way to see the original version of this film is to own the DVD. Anyway, The Return of Godzilla is incredible. It has a style all of its own, very unique, and brings Godzilla back to being a scary antagonist. S-Class. Easy. So Godzilla vs. Biollante comes next, and this one really sets the tone for the Heisei era. It introduces the tropes that last throughout this entire run of films. In this film, we meet Miki, a young woman with psychic abilities who becomes connected to Godzilla, and she returns in all of the Heisei films. We're also introduced to a new type of kaiju, which changes forms throughout the movie. Biollante evolves like a Pokemon or Digimon, and this trope also gets applied to each of the kaiju in all of the subsequent films during the entire Heisei era. The sad thing about this movie is it's so fucking rare in America. It took me years to find a copy of it. Actual years of searching online, looking through boxes at cons, fucking asking around. It's so rare, and it's such a shame because it's not only a great film, but influential to the series. If you can find it, take really good care of it because you have a rare jewel in your possession. S-Class. In 1991, Toho releases Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Remember now, this is in the Heisei era of Godzilla films, so this is our introduction to this version of King Ghidorah into this new canon. And they did an awesome job. This movie is fun as fuck. King Ghidorah has never looked cooler or more menacing. Like I said about the Heisei films, these kaiju evolve, Pokemon style, and King Ghidorah is no exception. We see 3 forms of King Ghidorah in this movie. And the first is the kind of pre-evolved form, where he looks like 3 little bat creatures, almost like little gremlins that are very cute. These evolve into King Ghidorah, who then, through needlessly convoluted circumstances involving time travel and a robot that definitely isn't like the Terminator, evolves into Mecha King Ghidorah. We also are introduced to a pre-evolved form of Godzilla called Godzillasaurus, thereby tying Godzilla into this kind of new way for the Godzilla kaiju to be. The villains in this movie are evil Caucasians from the future who came back in time to sabotage Japan before they can grow into the ultimate superpower from their timeline. Miki returns and really establishes herself here as a strong human counterpart to Godzilla's journey. It's a solid movie, and it gets an A. Next is the 1992 movie that is a contender for the longest title, and that's Godzilla vs. Mothra. Godzilla and Mothra Battle for Earth. It is a movie that kicks ass. Mothra is in top form, and we get introduced to a new kaiju, a sort of dark Mothra named Batra. Batra is Mothra's evil emo cousin whose wings look like a Guy Fieri shirt, and I absolutely love it. This movie continues the Heisei tradition of stealing tropes and scenes, and this time it's borrowing pretty heavily from Indiana Jones in a few scenes, but whatever, we love that. This movie also drops the new version of the Mothra Awakening song, which is a fucking banger. This movie's a little silly, but it still rocks. I give it a B. And then came the 1993 movie with the confusing title of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. Despite the 2 in the title, this is the first time we're seeing the character of Mechagodzilla in this particular canon. The last time we saw this savvy silver scoundrel was in the Showa era. So his introduction into this new canon should be amazing, however, the movie's just a little dull. Mechagodzilla in the film is great, but he just doesn't really live up to the Showa version, in my opinion. I really like the villain Mechagodzilla, and in this movie, he's just a robot that was built by the humans to fight against Godzilla, and that's just not as cool. We get a new baby Godzilla in this one that's cute. Different character from Manila. This one is just baby Godzilla. Looks and acts different. Miki is back, and we see her psychic abilities increasing. Rodan is in it. This movie gets a C. Next comes Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla from 1994. This one is quite good. The kaiju introduced is Space Godzilla, a character that's essentially Godzilla combined with a crystal gem from Steven Universe. Miki is back once again, and in this movie, she actually has a major role and is central to the plot. She's awesome in this movie. I really like her journey. The only downside to her story is that they kind of shoehorn in this subplot of her falling in love with some really pushy dork. Baby Godzilla returns as well, but this time he's evolved into Little Godzilla. This movie also contains one of my favorite tropes in the Godzilla canon, which is the appearance of the fairy Mothras. Little tiny Mothras that communicate messages on behalf of Mothra, who's off-planet during the events of this film. The fight scenes are great. The storyline is good too. I really feel for Miki in this movie. This movie is basically her stand against, like, toxic masculinity, which is a pretty progressive stance for 1994 Japan. This makes it even worse and weirder that they have the subplot of her falling in love with a super toxic dumbass. This movie is solid. It probably should get a B, but I'm gonna give it an A just because Space Godzilla is so cool. The way he floats around and fights is awesome. Moving on now to Godzilla vs. Destroyer from 1995. This film marks the end of the Heisei era of Godzilla films, and just like the final film of the Showa era, this one kicks ass. The overall look of this movie is something I really love. It has a really kind of very 90s quality to it. Like if you were to make a supercut of just things that look and sound very 90s, you'd have to include some of the scenes from this movie. Our heroes set out to find little Godzilla from the previous film to find that he has yet again evolved into a new higher evolution dubbed Godzilla Jr. Although when testing their new oxygen destroyer, they discover they have accidentally created a new life form called Destroyer. Just like all the kaiju in the Heisei era, Destroyer changes forms several times during the movie, becoming progressively more powerful along the way. This movie again brings the mood back to something that really feels like a monster movie again. The scenes of Destroyer attacking are dark, scary, sinister looking. The plot between the human characters is well done, and the monster action is top quality. I could go on more about this movie, but I'll stop here and place it in the S class. The next film, Godzilla 2000 from 1999. This movie starts the next era of Godzilla movies, dubbed the Millennium Era. This run of films is interesting as each movie is completely standalone, as in each movie establishes a completely new canon in itself, which leaves the writers open to make some wild decisions. This particular installment is really good, but not the best. The story here is just kind of a little weak. Now, Godzilla does get to battle one of the coolest monsters in the whole franchise, Agra, created specifically for this film. The battle scenes are super high quality, although some of the 90s digital animation hasn't aged very well. Overall, this movie seems like a very ambitious undertaking. Some of the special effects and some of the things we see Godzilla do and some of the ways the humans interact with him are things we've never seen before in the franchise, and at some points in this movie, they turn out beautiful, and some they are not. This movie gets a B. Next is Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. Now here is where the Millennium Era really starts to get weird. This movie is especially strange in the way each kind of scene plays out. There's a lot of strange stylistic choices and changes. It's almost like one of those movies like Four Rooms, where they change directors from scene to scene. Like the movie's overall style varies wildly from scene to scene in Megaguirus. For example, there's like one part where you see this dude's head get crushed. And I mean like crushed, like a Tom Savini effect. Smashed with gore and all that. Just all of a sudden, out of nowhere, extreme gore. And it's just that one part in that one scene. Like the movie isn't really violent at all until that happens, and it's not really gory at all after that. It's just all of a sudden there, like, damn, okay. And the way it ends, like the final line of dialogue before the credits roll is just like, what? Definitely awesome, though. I mean, this movie kicks ass. Not only kicks ass, this movie kicks dicks. This movie kicks dicks hard and is going to go in the S class. Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah Monsters All-Out Attack. This movie plays a lot with the tropes of Godzilla and sort of puts a new spin on the whole thing. Like, this movie is to Godzilla what, like, the Nolan films are to Batman. Like, they're not really Batman. They're good, but they're not, like, the real Batman. That's how this movie is. It's good, but it's not really, like, really Godzilla and really Mothra and really King Ghidorah. Oh, also Baragon is in this movie. I don't know why he didn't make his name didn't make the marquee, but he is in it. It takes these characters and it kind of builds a new world around them. The message of the film is pretty strong and subversive, and it unfolds and kind of is saying like, hey, Japan, it's Japan. I think it's time we really reconciled with some of the heinous shit in our past, because our current method of acting like nothing happened is dangerous. The message in the movie is a little more complex than that, but I don't have too much time to get into it. Believe me, I wish I did. This movie, the message it's giving is one that I really think that we, as Americans, could learn from and could stand to remember, especially right now. So this movie is pretty serious and delivers a complex message, and that's awesome, and I love that. However, while this movie has one of the strongest human plots, one of the best in the franchise, they get one thing terribly wrong: the monsters. They're all just not right. They're way cutified. Like, they cuted it. Other than Godzilla, who they made look way scarier than normal, they took King Ghidorah and Baragon and just like made them way cuter. And King Ghidorah being a hero is just silly. I mean, like, they made a cool plot, but they failed with the monsters. That's like not forgivable. This movie goes in the C class. Okay, remember when I said the Millennium Era is all standalone films? Well, that's true, except for these next two movies. The next two films are Godzilla against Mechagodzilla and Tokyo SOS. I'm going to group these two together because one is a direct continuation of the other, and they both have very similar moods and themes, and the characters from the first continue directly onward to the second. They're the first Godzilla films that really don't work on their own. Like, you have to see both. Even in the past where the movies directly continued into each other, they all kind of work by themselves, but with these two, you kind of have to see them together to complete the story. These movies are really good. Stylistically, they remind me a lot of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Everything in these films just works beautifully, and they both go in the S class. Godzilla Final Wars from 2004. This movie is absolutely fucking balls to the wall, batshit, high octane insanity. The movie starts at 100 miles per hour and it never slows down. It's so over the top and so ridiculous. It effectively serves as a tribute for all the previous Godzilla films. They go back and pick out all the best parts from all the previous films, from all the previous eras, and just brings them together beautifully. The aliens from Invasion of the Astro Monster, they're in it. Manila, he's in it. King Ghidorah, back in his villain mode, in it. Mothra's in it. Pretty much all the monsters are in it. Mutant humans are in it. The rare occurrence of a American protagonist is in it. This movie sets out to accomplish what Destroy All Monsters failed to do, and it brings all the best and even some of the worst kaiju together into one film. Sadly, Titanosaurus didn't make the cut, and gladly, Gabara is nowhere in it. Other than that, pretty much everyone is here. This is the final movie in the Millennium Era, and the final Godzilla movie for the next 12 years. It serves as a great goodbye to Godzilla and is in the S class. 12 years with no Godzilla, then out of nowhere we get Shin Godzilla. The famed creator of Neon Genesis Evangelion makes his debut into the Godzilla franchise. This film begins the current era of Godzilla movies, dubbed the Reiwa era. This is a film that asks a lot from the audience. To some, this one seems slow and repetitive. The humans in the film are pretty much exclusively just in offices and conference rooms, and running around to different offices and conference rooms, arguing with each other as Godzilla wreaks havoc. What you have to realize when watching this film is that it's supposed to be frustrating. You're supposed to get pissed and impatient at all of these politicians and experts sitting around in rooms arguing while thousands are dying. This movie really plays up that socio-political commentary side of Godzilla. Similar to Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, giant monsters all-out attack. This movie kind of takes the same themes of that movie and just effectively portrays them. Also kind of ties in some of the political points of the return of Godzilla. We see a lot of the back and forth between Japan and America in this movie, in Shin Godzilla. Now, this movie has a lot to say about Japan, America, our mutual histories. The very last shot of this movie is haunting. This movie is very dark. It's just something you've got to watch. It's S-class. Next, we have three movies that go directly together. And these are Godzilla, Planet of the Monsters, Godzilla, City on the Edge of Battle, and Godzilla, the Planet Eater. These are not movies that stand alone, and they all go together to complete one story. Also, these are animated films. The animation is that really ugly-looking 3D anime shit. These are not movies that I probably would have even watched if it weren't for the fact that they were Godzilla. However, since I did watch them, they're actually fantastic. The story is great. The world building that these movies accomplish is unmatched by any of the other Godzilla movies. The characters, their story arcs are incredible. If you can set aside the kind of bland and soulless looking characters, the depth of their personalities saves this series. It saves these three films. If you do watch them, I recommend watch all three. By the end of that third movie, I was surprised at how invested I was in what was going on. The story really pays off in a very satisfying way. These three are solid, and they go in the B class. All right, and here we are at the end. The last film in the entire franchise, Godzilla -1. This one is literally in theaters right now. So I'm not going to say a whole lot about it. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it yet. I'll just say that this movie really brings the whole franchise full circle, really goes back to that 1954 Godzilla feel. If you haven't seen it, go see it now. It is S-Class and completes the list. All right, let's review. So the S-Class. These were the movies that I think best represent the franchise, specifically from somebody maybe coming in new, somebody that doesn't know a whole lot of Godzilla or hasn't really seen the movies or sat down and tried to really watch any of them before. That's what made it into this bracket. The movies that I think are best for new fans coming in. That was my thinking behind, not including the first movie, the 1954. I know that was probably surprising that wasn't in the S-Class, but that's the reason. It's a great film, and it certainly started something great, but to fully appreciate that movie, you have to have a pretty good understanding of film history, specifically Japanese film history and world history, like really understanding what was going on at that time. So that's why that ends up in that bracket. Everything in the S-Class, I think coming in completely cold, these movies will be enticing. These movies are all phenomenal in that way. Then moving down to the A-Class, where the 1954 ended up, the 1954 version ended up. And also Ibira, and this is probably one of my personal favorites, but I didn't put it in the S-Class because it doesn't necessarily, I think, appeal to that broader audience that I think most of the movies I included in the S-Class would. But for the most part, the S-Class does represent my personal favorites, both the S and the A-Class. These, however many movies that is, that's a lot of them. Those represent the ones that I think are really the best in those two brackets. The B-Class, these are them. I think that some of these are quite good as well. Invasion of the Astro Monster. When I put that in the B-Class, to be honest, I was worried that I was going to put too many things just in A and S-Class. Invasion of the Astro Monster is really good. Those three anime ones on Netflix are awesome. The only reason they're in B-Class is because that type of animation, like 3D anime, a big NO for me. No, thank you. I'm okay. I don't like it. But I did watch them because they are Godzilla, and fuck, I mean, I gotta hand it to them. They made really, really good movies. It would have been nice if the animation was good. That being said, the Singular Point series on Netflix actually pretty good. That one is good. Good job to them on that one. The C-Class is kind of like, these are the movies that are just there but don't really need to be. C-Class is almost kind of worse than F-Class for that kind of reason. I mean, the movies in F-Class are like the worst of the worst, so they're almost worth checking out. The C-Class is just like, these movies aren't even bad enough to piss you off. They're just kind of boring. Godzilla and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, isn't boring, though. I will say that. That movie is engaging. I had to go in C-Class, though, because they fucked up on the monsters. I mean, come on. Like, the monsters have to come first, man. That's what I don't like, when they skimp on the monsters. Like, that was the problem with, like, Pacific Rim. It was like, you made this whole cool thing, and then, like, the monsters aren't even good. Like, what do the monsters in Pacific Rim even look like? I can't even picture them in my head. Anyway, that's the C-Class. And then, of course, the F-Class. These movies are terrible. I don't recommend watching them unless you're, like, in that special masochistic fucking type of mood and you want to just see something really bad. Godzilla Raids Again. I know when I described it, I said it was on an incel type mindset, and that might have been weird to say about a movie from the 50s, but even for the 50s, this movie is so awkward, man. It's so awkward. This guy, like the pilot guy, like what the fuck, like this movie. Oh my god. The plot is so really, really cringy, man. And then King Kong versus Godzilla. What I didn't get a chance to talk too much about was the fact that it's so hard to find the original cut of that movie. I don't think it exists. I've never seen it. I've never seen that movie with the original cut. Everyone that I know and all the versions I've ever seen were the recut, the American recut with the added scenes and stuff. If any of you guys have seen the Japanese cut with the Japanese voices of King Kong vs. Godzilla 1962, let me know, because even in that big Showa era collection thing that Criterion released a while back, which is a great collection in the big pink book, even that one has only the recut, and that's Criterion, so I would have thought, you know what I mean. All Monsters Attack, might as well not watch it. If you watch the other movies, there's no reason to see it. It's just a clip show. And then Godzilla vs. Megalon, a lot of classic moments in that one. That's probably the best one in the F-Class, just because it does have some really funny moments to that really shitty tag team match. But it's so poorly made. It's so poorly made. And some of these movies, obviously, it had to be made on the fly, and they have to be made cheaply. But this movie is even lower. Like, a lot of the shots are just overexposed even. I mean, there's parts of the movie where you can't even see the actors' faces and stuff. Like,
not in like an artistic way that like they meant. It's just the shots are overexposed and everything just looks black. Bad job. They did such a bad job with that movie. What else? Oh, I know the description is going to say every movie ranked, and just in case anybody is like, well, you didn't rank all the movies. What about the American ones? In the beginning, I said I wouldn't rank them, but I might as well just do it right now. They would all go in F class, so boom, that's easy. Anyways, that's enough. I'll go ahead and stop there. Again, I think these things are kind of fun to make. My Ninja Turtles one I made a while back was really fun to do. I'm working on trying to get a way to do these more quickly. But I always end up talking way too much, so there's way more to edit and stuff. So anyways, let me know if there's any franchises you guys think are cool, or any other kind of like tier lists you think would be interesting for me to kind of do in this way. And maybe I'll do it if I have time. And see you later.